Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. This is Bamert Seed's webinar on how to create an effective native custom seed blend to accomplish your reclamation goals. Today, you'll discover how to leverage seed spec to develop custom native seed blends, the importance of soil and climate in seed selection, how to align your native seed blend with project goals, and resources and tools to create exceptional native seed blends. Before we get started, please know that you're welcome to ask any questions using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. We'll do our best to answer those questions at the end of the webinar, and if we can't get to something, we'll send you an email and follow up either way. I'd like to introduce you to Rob Cook. Rob is the Director of Business Development at Bamert Seed Company, a leading provider of high-quality native grass, forb, and legume seeds to the agriculture and reclamation industries. With almost 20 years of experience in consulting land managers on improving ecological function on grazing lands across the Southern Great Plains, Rob brings extensive knowledge and expertise to his role at Bamert Seed. Bob is also the chairman of the National Grazing Lands Coalition, and he serves on the board of National Bob White and Grassland Foundation. Rob, take it away.
Thank you, Melanie.
Sure.
I want to thank everybody for their time. I know we're all busy these days, but thank you for your time, for attending and for registering. I just wanted to mention we have a wide variety of folks that I know are attending, from the agriculture field, industry, wildlife industry, reclamation, and construction. So I'm going to try to touch on all of those perspectives to make sure that we all understand some of the processes and the principles that we're discussing here from everybody's perspective. But I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we can jump into it here. Okay, so we're going to talk about, as Melanie mentioned, how to create an effective custom seed blend that's adapted to our sites, whether, like I said earlier, it's a construction project or a land use change in an agriculture setting. Again, like she mentioned, my name is Rob Cook. Here's my contact information if anybody's interested. I want to tell you a little bit about Bamert Seeds before we get started. You can see here, Bamert Seed was started in 1951. It's still a family-owned business in Muleshoe, Texas, Panhandle of Texas. We produce about 80% of the seeds that we sell on our own farms here in the Panhandle, with some strategic production in some other areas, also some strategic native harvests at times. But we produce about 100 to 120 different species and varieties. The goal of that is to ensure that we have the correct species and the correct varieties that fit all the areas that we're selling into. That's what we want to make sure we're selling the right seed that's adapted to your project. And one of the things that makes us unique is our sales staff. And we've been blessed not to hire seed salesmen. We have ecologists with Brian and Nicholas and James on staff. Those folks are a great resource as we talk through this process of developing site-specific custom blends. We're going to talk about a tool to help us do that we've developed, but those guys are also a great resource to anybody working through that. They do a great job of developing those blends to help make sure our customers have success, and not just pushing out what we have the most of in the warehouse. So they could be contacted at this number, 806-395-3141. So what is Seed Spec? So Seed Spec is a collaboration between us and Colorado State University, Bamert Seed. I say a collaboration. I've worked with the team at Colorado State previously in my career, with George Peacock, Dr. Olaf David, and now Lucas on our team, and understood that these folks had the capability to develop this application, this tool that we wanted to develop to help speed up this process, and they were the right team to do it. So we got with them to help us develop this web application, this tool. But it's a web app to help users develop site-specific native seed blends. And we're going to discuss the principles and the data that go in to develop a site-specific blend. And that's what this tool does, is it incorporates those and makes it really intuitive to bring all of those principles and that data together to help anyone develop those blends. So first off, why seed spec? So native grass has a reputation. It's notorious to be hard to establish, and some of that's earned, but a lot of it's because we're not using the right species, the right variety of those species in the correct spot. We have to have seed that's adapted to our area. We also at Bamert Seed have we get some specifications sometimes that with a variety of species, and a lot of those are just not commercially available. So that takes time from everybody, from the folks that design those specs to the folks that are um, um, responsible for getting that seed planted or following through with those specs. It takes a lot of time to get those changed. So we developed seed spec to kind of cut down on some of that and to be the first step of this conversation, to make sure that if our users can develop a site specific blend, it takes hours off of the conversation with our reclamation specialist. And then we can just start fine tuning that blend and our recommendations to make sure that we're meeting the goals of our projects. So data is out there in multiple places to help folks develop a site-specific blend on what grows in certain areas and what species could be adapted. But a lot of times it's cumbersome to get to. You have to have a working knowledge maybe of those data sets, and it's in multiple places, and it's hard to bring all together. Like I mentioned earlier, species selection is critical to having success when we're trying to establish a native blend. We have to have the right species in the correct spot. And then knowing which varieties of each one of those species is just as important. Take Cytosgrama, for example. At Bamert Seed, we have 5 different varieties of that one species of Cytosgrama that are adapted to different regions, different ecotypes across our area of influence. And we have those 5 to try to make sure that we get the most adapted variety of that one species to help ensure success. Then how do I know it's commercially available? Even if I gather the data to understand what natively grows on my sites, how do I know what's available? And then how do I know how to develop a seed blend? So those were the reasons behind seed spec. You can see here, this kind of yellow-orange area is where the tool is adapted to. And that changes as these data sets changes. So it actually looks a little bit different right now. But what I want to mention here is, even if you're not in this area where this tool works, we're going to walk through the principles and the processes and the data behind developing a site-specific blend. So even though we're walking through the tools, we're going to bring out those principles to help you, even if you're not inside this area, to help you be successful in developing a blend. And then again, also remember that our sales staff, our reclamation specialists, are a great resource for you to help develop those blends. So again, even if you're not or your project's not within this area, the principles and the things we're going to talk about throughout this presentation are going to have value to you. So first off, why are we going to plant natives? Well, here's the things that natives bring to us. The biodiversity, and we're going to talk a lot about biodiversity here, but the biodiversity they bring to our project, to our area, are very important. It provides all of these things below it, and that diverse that biodiversity is adapted. We're going to make sure through this process that it's adapted to the site, so it helps us have success. Provides wildlife habitat, pollinator habitat. That's a huge topic right now, and rightly so, for many different reasons. But for our food chain, pollinator habitat is really important. Ecosystem services. So these native biodiverse habitats provide a lot of ecosystem services to society. So in agriculture setting, it's food and fiber are the first ones we think about, but there's many more things. The wildlife pollinator habitat, clean air, clean water, carbon. There's several different things that these diverse habitats that we get from successful reclamation projects in any industry through a diverse native seed blend provide for all of us. And then fewer inputs. Compared to maybe an introduced or monoculture where we have to have several inputs to make the system work. Inputs meaning fertilizer, spray, other soil amendments to make those work. So natives and properly functioning biodiverse system of natives has fewer inputs. So one thing we could talk about is biodiversity above ground and what that does. That biodiversity above ground also leads to biodiversity below ground, as you can see in this picture. And whether we're in a wildlife setting where that biodiversity provides insects and foods for our birds, nesting habitat, attracts all different flora and fauna above ground, we're also attracting the flora and fauna below ground. The biology below ground is just as important as it is above ground. If we're in a grazing land setting, the biodiversity and the different plants that we introduce into these systems allow those grazing animals to choose their diet, choose the most nutritious parts of all the different diverse plants that we have up there in a way that they're able to choose their diet better than we're able to feed it out of a bag. So those are some of the benefits there. Another thing that this biodiversity does is gives us a little bit of drought insurance. So all these different plants have all these different root structures below ground, and you can see they're at different parts of that soil profile. And each one of these plants also has different growth curves, meaning that they demand nutrients and resources at different times during the year compared to their neighbors, maybe. So those roots are demanding resources at different parts of the soil profile at different times of the year, so we have less competition in a diverse setting as opposed to maybe what we would have in a monoculture or an introduced setting when all of those one species are demanding the same resources at the same time of the year at the same part of the soil profile. So, we add some resiliency to our systems when we have this diversity. The diversity below ground allows us to develop great soil structure. What that soil structure does is it helps increase our water infiltration. So we're getting more of our rainfall that falls on our projects, on our grazing lands, our wildlife lands. We're having more of that water infiltrate into the soil. So our hydrological cycle is working better. We're using that rainfall becomes more effective, and we're using it to grow our forage and our habitat for our animals. We're also reducing ponding and flooding. So our hydrological cycle is functioning properly. Our nutrient cycle is functioning more properly, and our energy cycle is functioning more properly. So the biodiversity is the key, along with good management, to make sure all those cycles are functioning properly. And so I've always wondered, like in a monoculture setting, let's take a Bermuda grass, for example, a coastal field. We can produce 8,000 pounds of forage production per acre with all these inputs, with fertilizer and weed spray. We can also do that in a native biodiverse system without all those inputs. So why is that? Why is one system able to function without the inputs? And the reason is because the biodiversity allows all of our cycles to function properly, and the system's working on its own without our inputs, if we're managing it properly. So again, why is biodiversity important? So the biodiversity of below ground attracts the biology below ground. And it's when we talk about carbon, and I always tell our customers, I don't care what side of the coin they are on the carbon discussion, because it's opportunity for everybody involved, and it helps us all to be better. But there's also opportunity monetarily and other ways for us when we're looking at carbon. So the majority of the carbon that enters in the soil comes from our roots, and 20 to 50% of that carbon enters our soil because of what the roots give off. And then the biology, the microbes that attracts. So the more diverse our system is, the more microbes we attract, the more exudates we're giving off, the more carbon we're putting into the system. and the healthier all of our the more structure we have in our soil, the better it functions, and the better all of our systems work. So you can't give a presentation without some graphs. I think that's what the way I've been taught. But these are pretty simple. So we don't want to complicate these. But what this basically shows here on this axis down here is, as our number of species increases, the amount of microbial biomass in our soil also increases. So the more biodiversity we have, the more microbes we have in the soil. And we've discussed the importance of microbes in a healthy soil and a healthy system. Let's take it a step further. The more biodiversity we have in the system, the more plant species we have, the more microbial respiration we have. That means the more life there is in that soil, the better the system's working. And this just kind of shows how that system's working better. As we increase our plant species or our biodiversity, the total plant nitrogen, the available nitrogen in that system increases. So this is one explanation of why we don't have to add fertilizers in a properly functioning, diverse native system. Okay, so we've discussed a little bit about why natives. Let's talk about a little bit. I talked about we're talking about the principles and some of the data that we use to get to a custom site-specific blend. And this is one of those, web soil survey. And I'm sure there's several folks that are in attendance today that understand what this tool is. This is a great tool from NRCS. I've used it my whole career. Basically, it's the entire USGS, the National Soils Database for the US. And this is the user interface for this. It's a phenomenal tool, has tons of information, almost too much information. There's way more information in this tool than we need to develop a site-specific custom blend. And it can be a little bit cumbersome to understand how to use it and a little bit time-consuming, but this is what it looks like. So you can see here that what you do is you draw off your area, your project. So let's pretend we're wanting to reseed this, and remember kind of this area because we're going to see it later on. But you draw off your area of interest, where your project is, and then you can start gleaning tons of data from this. Probably more than we really want to know. But again, I can't stress enough how valuable this tool is, but how much data that's in it. And so we just kind of wanted to streamline this process. So you can, you work through it, you get what your soils are. So here's part of the difficulty is you have to understand what a map unit symbol is, the name of our soils. You have to understand that maybe there's components within that map unit symbol and what that means. And then that there's ecological sites tied to each one of these components. And the ecological sites is important because that's where we're going to get our species composition list for what grows natively on our site. That's a totally different database. So we're talking right now about understanding all the complexities of a map unit symbol and a component within those, and how that relates to a management practice, reestablishing native vegetation on this site. And then we have to take that to a totally different database, and then understand this other database. So we're just trying to simplify this whole process, but we understand that there's data behind this, third-party data from USDA that's out there for the majority of these sites, especially in the areas that we had shaded where the tool works. And that's why those areas are there. That's why the tool works, is because this data behind this tool, these data sets are populated for these areas. So I mentioned earlier that each one of these soil types, each one of these components have a corresponding ecological site. So you see here's one of those ecological sites. So within the web soil survey, you can click on these ecological sites, and it takes you to a different database. It's called the Edit database. It's another USDA database, and that houses, again, tons of information about these ecological sites. So the ecological sites are important because there's the soils, a couple of different groups of soils can make up one ecological site. An ecological site is the soils, the geography, and the climate of this specific management unit, um, that that allows you to understand how your management can impact that area. There's tons of information in here again. There's a species composition list, and if you understand how to get there, that's great. Um, Here's that species composition list. So here's what natively grows on this ecological site that's within our area of interest. So you can see all of these different species. You can, you have your scientific name, and then you see the production of pounds per acre for each one of those. So that basically tells us how much of each one of these species is in this diverse blend on this ecological site. That's just one part of our area of interest. So if we get here, if we know enough to get here, we're still not quite to where we need to be able to develop a site-specific blend. So we don't know necessarily what's commercially available. And if we look through this species composition list, there's a lot there. So this is one of the things that if you're developing a blend on your own, a specification on your own, seeing all these species is great, but what's available to purchase on the market? And so that's another one of the things that this tool does. Also, we discussed earlier, of all these, we have the species, but how do I know which variety of sand bluestem is most adapted to my area? That data is in a totally different data set, and it's really not it's disjointed. It's not congruent. It's hard to get to each one of those. So that's another reason for the tools, is we put all that together to help you as a user select the right variety of that species to help you be more successful. And then how much of each one of those do I put within my blend? Um, and then what if I'm not familiar with some of these? What if they don't match my goals? So we move to seed spec. Again, I know there might be some folks on here who are in areas where this tool doesn't work, but we'll walk through the principles to help make sure you're successful, whether you can use this tool or whether you can find data elsewhere and just understand how that's applicable to your situation, or call into our reclamation specialist here at Bamert Seed. So what seed spec does, and it kind of works. I'm kind of simple-minded, so I wanted to make sure we developed something that was pretty simple. So it kind of works like TurboTax. You have to complete one step before you move to the next, and it walks you through that process to bring all this data we just discussed into one place. So the first thing we do is we define our seeding area. So we draw off on our map, just like on Web Soil Survey, our area of interest or our project. And if you recognize this is the same place that we had pulled up in Web Soil Survey earlier. But like I said, you go step by step. So you have to complete step one, drawing your area of interest, before you move to step two, and then step three and step four. So in step one is the only place that you can draw or edit the boundaries of your area of interest or your field or your property. And here's some of the edit tools that exist over here. So you can't in a different step edit your geometry, edit your field boundaries, and kind of mess things up. Each one of those steps has certain steps and certain processes that you complete in that step, and that's the only place you can do it, to kind of help make it more simple and to make sure that we don't complicate and change things as we go. So first step is, my hope is we have time at the end of this so we can do kind of a live demo to show this. But this tool has where you just draw individual vertices. So you just click and draw off your square or irregular shape of wherever your project is. It has where we can draw a circle. If we're doing a pivot, center pivot like here, we can automatically draw a circle, automatically draw a rectangle or a square, or we can import a shapefile if you already have it. So the next thing we're going to do is look at our soils information. So what this tool does, and you might recognize this from the screen earlier from Web Soil Survey, is it uses our area of interest, our project, as a cookie cutter. It goes to that large soil database and brings back only the information that we need that's pertinent to developing a site-specific custom blend. All that other information is great, but it's not needed directly for our application or our situation. So we just streamlined the process and made it easier to get that information. So we have a soils map here that has our map unit symbols below us, kind of in this tabular form. So it shows us how many acres of each one of these map unit symbols is in our area of interest, and what percentage of our area of interest makes up that map unit symbol. You can see it just in tabular form without our map, if that's of interest. You could click on our table down here, and it highlights that map unit symbol on our map. It also gives you a brief description of what that is to help if you feel like you need to kind of ground truth it. If you have an understanding of profiles, great, that information's here, and you can ground truth it. If not, it doesn't muddy the waters with so much information to make it confusing for us. You can also click on your map up here on a map unit symbol, and it will bring you the same information in our dialog box here. Another thing that this does is then views our ecological sites that we just discussed that come from the edit database. So when you look at your ecological sites, it gives you the same information in our tabular form. It shows you which ecological sites are present in an area of interest, the acres that are there, and the percentage of each one of those that make up our area of interest. The same thing works here. We are able to click on our map unit symbol, and it gives us what ecological site corresponds with that. It's hot linked to go back to the edit database. You can go to that specific ecological site description that we viewed earlier. So if you have a working knowledge of ecological sites, or you want to delve in deeper to what's in all the data in this ecological site, you can, right? You could go directly to that and get in the weeds per se as much as you want to. If that's not of value to you in your project, we don't muddy the waters and bring all that information in and make things confusion. We want to make it as intuitive as possible, and then also add other users the ability to really dive into the information. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to help develop the site-specific custom blend. So this is what that report looks like. So if you remember on our example earlier, we had more than one ecological site. That one, I think we had 3. There's several times that you'll have multiple ones. What this tool does is it helps weight by dominance those ecological sites. And so the species composition for each one of those might be different, right? We might have 6 different ecological sites. We might have 3 or 4 that are the majority, and 2 that are, that are kind of less dominant. But it weights our species composition list from each one of those ecological sites, right, to help us determine what's adapted and what grows, and get a complete list of the species that we have in our area of interest. It takes it a step further, and it looks at a database that has species that are on the commercial market, that are available for purchase in amounts that are good for like a landscape scale. So there might be a pound or 2 on the market of some of these things that are not included in this list, but this list is pretty complete. And it's not just my list. It's not just what we sell here at Bamert Seed. It's a list of what's on the market. So you take a list of everything that grows within our area of interest, cross-reference it with what's commercially available, and it gives you this report. It comes back with, these are the species that are available for purchase on the market that are adapted to my site. So I know each one of these species has the potential to be successful in my area. Okay, we take it a step further even, and you can see this one specifically. This is little blue stem, but the variety of that species is Cimarron. So we've got 4 different varieties of little blue stem in our stocks, and that we grow and produce to be adapted to different areas. So this tool recommends the variety of that species that's adapted to your specific site to help make sure that you're successful, which is extremely important. There's also a slot here that recommends the percentage of that species to put in your blend based off of those ecological site descriptions. And so we saw what forage production there was, how many pounds per acre of each one of those species typically grows within that ecological site. So this is where we weight that species composition list to help give you a recommendation of how much of each one of those species should go into your blend. So this is the recommendation, and here is where the user inputs what percentage of that blend they want this specific species to be. So it shows 0 to 5%. This is user input. So you can see here we left some of them blank. We didn't put any in vine mesquite. We didn't put. It's basically a 0 if you leave it blank. There's not going to be vine mesquite in this blend. So the user gets to define that. And these are just recommendations. So if you have a working knowledge of these species and of your goals and understand what you're trying to do, you can develop this blend on your own, and you might want more than 5% of little blue stem, Cimarron little blue stem in your blend. This can be any number that you as a user wants it to be. We don't want to one thing that I've seen on a lot of these tools is we try to account for every single situation that might exist, every single goal that might exist. And what happens is we make an extremely complicated tool that's not intuitive, and that we can't really account for every situation that exists out there. So a lot of times when it's very complicated and inputs are hard and it's hard for the user, our outcomes are not what we want to be. The value of this is we know all of these species are adapted. So we're going to have success with getting a stamp. And then we can use our knowledge as a user to really fine tune that, or we can have a starting point that we can then take to somebody. Okay, this is what's adapted. This is what's available for my site. Help me work through this. Call in and talk to Nicholas or Brian or James and say, help me work through this and let's fine tune this. Now we're 2, 3, 4 hours down the road in our conversation, and we can really get to meeting our staff can really get to meeting the goals of your project. But what this does, you can see here, and again, remember, this is user input. This example shows 105% of the blend. And the reason we can get to 105% or 200% or 50% or whatever the user needs is there is a published seeding rate based off pure live seed. That's what PLS stands for. So if you're not familiar with that, you can go to our website and there's a blog on what pure live seed is. Make sure you're purchasing your seed on a PLS basis, so you know it's basically the viable seed in the bag. So you can compare apples to apples and you know what you're actually getting. But NRCS has a published seeding rate. So a full seeding rate of this one species of little blue stem is 3.4 PLS pounds per acre. So this application, this tool does the math. I want 5% of my blend to be little blue stem. So it takes 3.4 times 5%. So we know that we're going to be planting 0.17 PLS pounds per acre on this project and just little blue stem. So we know how many acres are in our project. So then we know there's 12.26 PLS pounds of little blue stem in my entire blend to plant on all of my acres for this project. And remember, these are published NRCS rates. They're great rates, conservation rates, meaning this is the amount of 100% seeding rate, 100% blend of these different species will mean I'll plant each species in the amount that allows me to meet conservation goals, meaning to establish and stop erosion. And they're also taking into account that this is going to be planted in a really good seed bed. And we all know in the real world, especially in reclamation, that's not always doable, right? And so, kind of the industry standard is to double this rate. So, if we could see 105% rate is 4.3 PLS pounds per acre. Probably a lot of times the sweet spot is a 7 to 8 PLS pounds per acre. You can do that by doubling your percentages when you're selecting a blend. The value to this also, though, when we're using this is if you follow the recommendations in the blend and the NRCS seeding rate as it meets NRCS standards and specifications, if you're within one of their projects. So again, sometimes this is a little confusing if you're not used to these calculations of PLS pounds. If you have more interest in that, if we need to dive in that a little bit further and describe that in more detail, let me know. But if your goal is just I want an adapted blend that's in the percentages that match my site, this tool automatically kind of does that for you. So just remember, this is user inputted. You don't have to select every one of these. This percentage can be whatever matches your goals. And I would double the NRCS planting rate. I would get this to 150, 175, 200%. Another question I get a lot of the time is we look through all of these species that adapted and grow there. And this one, for instance, sand drop seed, I get a lot of questions of why would I want to plant sand drop seed in my project? If you're not familiar with that species, it's one that it's not an ice cream species. It's not one that people look to a lot for grazing or wildlife habitat. It's when we talk about plant succession, it's at the low end of the spectrum, mid to low end of the spectrum. So people ask, well, why will I want to pay to put a plant that I don't think much of in this blend? And why do I even want it out there on my site? Well, what happens a lot is when we talk about plant succession, a lot of times the higher successional species are the ice cream plants that we think of a lot. Very good for grazing, very good for wildlife habitat. Aesthetically, they're very nice. And a lot of times in a degraded site, those are the plants that we don't have. And that's the reason some of these other lower or mid-successional species have a bad rap, is because we've degraded the site with our management, and that's all that's left. But a lot of times when we have failures establishing a native planting is because we're planting soil that's in a degraded state for whatever reason, whether it's been mismanaged, whether it's in a some type of construction project where we really disturb the site, whatever reason it's in a degraded site, it's soil that's not in a high successional state. When we plant native plants, a lot of times we only plant the high successional species. So we're planting high successional species in soil that's in a low successional state, and then wondering why we're not having success. All of these other plants that are in this list, whether they're high successional or mid successional or low successional, are adapted to that area. And the importance of including some of those mid successional and low successional species is they help develop our soil. That's their job, kind of within our blend. We all have role players, right, on our team. And a lot of these low successional species are kind of our rebounders or our linemen on the football team. They do a lot of the work to help the entire team be successful. And they set the stage. They help develop our soil to be in a state that allows our higher successional, our ice cream plants, the ones that we really want to see, They get the biology going in the soil, they get a living root in the soil, they get cover, they get things going and set this stage for our higher successional species, our plants we want to see to be more successful. So anyway, we've developed our blend, and that's really important. That's something we don't want to forget, is to include some of those, especially in a degraded state. But we've kind of developed our blend, and now we're able to create. Oh, one thing I forgot to mention: each one of these species here has the scientific name. That's hot linked. That's a hot link that goes to the soil, to the NRCS plant USDA plant database. So if you're not familiar with the species and you don't know if it's going to meet your goals for your project, it might be a project where we have to worry about height requirements, and it needs to be below 2 foot. If you're not familiar with that species, you could go directly to the database. You don't have to go open another window in your browser, and try to find the species. It takes you to the plant database and gives you the description of what it is. Or maybe, I need to try to make sure I have flowering plants at different parts of the year. You could go to this USDA plant database and become familiar with that individual species to help you know whether or not you want to include it in your blend. Here again, we give you the information to get as granular and refined as you want to and develop your blend, but not bring in so much information that it's overwhelming, or not try to account for so many different uh, um, instances or goals that we might have in our project to make our tool overcomplicated. So then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to review our report. So you can see down here, when we create a report, we need to enter our information in a report so we understand what the project is. We have room for contact information if you pass this report along to a seed vendor for them to get back to you. Maybe the name of your project or what, so we can keep those straight. It also has a description here, and the hope of ours is you put enough information in that description so that whoever you pass this report along to understands things that are going into the projects and the goals to help further refine this recommendation. So you can download a report, you can print a report. There's even a button here you can hit request a quote, and it sends it directly to us at Bamert Seed, this seed report, to help us give you a quote automatically on that. We'll email you back. We get you a quote automatically on this specific blend. And this is what it looks like. So the front page is just kind of a location map. This is where our area of interest is. It has our contact information in the description. It gives the species composition. And you can see here, we even still include these species that you didn't select within your blend. The reason being is maybe there's an availability issue with one of these, and we have to substitute another species in to get to get you a diverse blend and the PLS pounds per acre that we're wanting. When we have this full list of adapted species, you as a user of the tool and us as a Bamert Seed as a seed vendor are confident that when we make a substitution and we use another one of these species, that it's adapted to your site, it's adapted to your project, and we're going to be successful. Also, sometimes cost is a limiting factor, and if you're working with one of our reclamation specialists and you've got 20% vine mesquite within your blend, that's an expensive species. And if your project price sensitive, we can make a recommendation to substitute something else in place of that to help meet your goal. And there's kind of your soils map to wrap it up. So we've talked through how the tool works. We talk about the principles and the data that goes into it for you to use. But unfortunately, these seeds aren't magic, and a seed salesman's probably not supposed to say that. But what's very important is to make sure we're selecting the right species and the right varieties, but we're also planting in the right way. And so, a lot of times, a good seed bed is not possible depending on our projects. It's optimal. We want to do it, but it's not always possible. So one thing you see here is we're planting into We're using a native grass drill, which is very important. A drill, no-till drill, is our number one recommendation of the best thing to use to get good seed soil contact. But you can see we're planting in an area that doesn't have any cover. Cover is important. It's extremely vital when we're talking native grass, a native seed blend. So what we do a lot of times if there's no cover is we use nurse crops. We use a warm season and a cool season annual crop to help nurse to come up, kind of hold the soil together, hold the world together, and help our other species have the ability to come in and establish. But native drill, grass drill is our first choice. A broadcast, or a brilliant or a trillion, it would be our second, where we're dropping the seed and running a cultipacker on it. Third would be a broadcast application where we're slinging the seed. But we need to make sure we drag or pack something afterwards to get good seed soil contact. So those would be our recommended methods. In settings where we can worry about our timing of application, it's very important. I know some construction projects we cannot, but it's important that we plant at the right time of the year if possible. We plant all our production fields in spring. Sometimes in certain parts of the world, we do plant in fall. In our part of the world, that's probably not optimal, but sometimes we do have those monsoon rains in the fall, and it's the best time to plant. What we need to make sure of is when we have germination on a perennial plant, it's going to put most of its resources and energy and time into root production. So if we plant in the fall or the midsummer and it turns off hot and dry, or we don't have enough time for that plant to really grow and get a good root system going, when we get into the winter and it gets really cold, we might have a reduction in stand. Also in the spring, we're able to maybe treat we have some flush of weeds, and we're able to treat that so we don't have too much competition and avoid shading out or too much competition to help reduce that and so we don't have a stand failure. Depth bands are very important. You can see that band on this opener. These native seeds, you don't want to plant any deeper than a half to a quarter of an inch. So a lot of times to have enough down pressure on that implement to keep it in the ground, we need to have these depth bands to make sure they don't go too deep. Also, agitators and picker wheels. You can see these blends are very diverse and fluffy. And if we don't have those agitators, it will bridge up and not stay in suspension, not stay blended together. It bridges up and it won't flow through our seed tubes. You can't use a regular grain drill on a lot of these natives, and we spend a lot of time helping folks understand that, but this is part of the reason. And there's also a picker wheel here to grab that seed and throw it down the seed tube. This is just an example of kind of a diverse blend. You can see everything from these little bitty seeds to some bigger ones, but that's why it's important to have those things on our native seed drills. So this photo is courtesy of Tim Sigmund with Texas Parks and Wildlife. This just shows how we can be. This is a reclamation project that they did. It shows how we can be successful by using the right equipment and selecting the proper seed. This is year 1 or year 2 of this project, but it just shows when you do things right that you can have some success. So again, here's my contact information if you need it. And Melanie, I'm going to stop sharing. I think we've got a little bit of time here for some questions.
Thank you, Rob. There were a few questions that came through from the audience. The first is, what is the cost of seed spec? What does that look like?
That's great. That's a great question. Seed spec is a free application. You just have to get on and register and get a login, but right now it's free for anybody to use. One thing that I didn't mention is you can have multiple projects right now going at the same time, but you can only have one area of interest and one seed report, one blend recommendation per project. So just know that. If you want another one, you have to open up a new project, and it's pretty intuitive. There's a project drop down up there on top of the tool, but it's free to use for anybody to use. Just get you register and get your log in, and anybody can use it.
And then, thank you, Rob. Along with that, Teresa asks, is the seeding rate based on broadcast or drilled application rates, 20 or
That's a
40 seeds per square meter, something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's based off, these NRCS rates are based off of a drilled rate. So if it was a broadcast rate, you would automatically double it, and then probably even more. But those NRCS rates are to get about 30 seeds per square foot. It's how they're developed, with the pounds per acre. But that was a great question.
Great. And Carrie asks regarding seed spec. I think that this is a great tool and I've tried to use it. I do not get a base map layer. Is there tech support that you can put me in touch with?
Yes, there's a contact us on there. You can email us at Bamert Seed. You can select different base maps. There's a the gear, the setting, the top right hand corner of that, of the tool, and there is different base maps. I usually use the USGS topo map, but yes, contact us and we'll see if we can help you out. Also, there are times where you get an error that says 30% or more of your area of interest doesn't have ecological site data. So that could be that NRCS has taken that offline for a while if they're doing updates, or you're in an area that just doesn't have ecological site data populated. Give you that error, just call us, and our reclamation specialist will help you walk through that. That's continually changing, and NRCS is continuing to update that, and hopefully that data set gets more and more robust and continues to grow. We use it because this is the best data set that I'm aware of, and it's the best that we have to understand our species composition. It's not entire, but it's not a seed company tell you what you should be planted. It's third-party data that's been verified. It's USDA data that we're using to help make sure we're selecting the most adapted species.
Allison asks, are there plans to extend this tool to other ecological regions?
There is, as those databases to continue to USDA databases, edit databases continue to grow, and there's opportunity if we have partners at different parts of the nation that's more of their sphere of influence to help to help that partner develop the tool specifically for their area.
Great. Have another question about rates from Kayla. Rob, with the increasing seed rates to double the recs, I know some are too low, would it increase competition in the new seedlings to where we get more vegetative growth versus good root development and increase rate of failure?
Sure. So that's always kind of been the discussion. And there's research. There's several different and I can provide these. I think I can dig them up. But there's a lot of research that suggests long term there's no difference in higher seeding rate. But the first 5, 10, 15 years, the higher the seeding rate, the more success that you have. The more stand establishment, the less bare ground, the higher the species richness, the more PLS pounds you plant per acre. So the competition takes care of itself. And eventually the system takes care of itself. So one that meets specs, if NRCS specifications call for 3 pounds and you plant 6 pounds, eventually in year 10, they're probably going to look about the same. But in between that time, the higher the seeding rate, the more successful you're going to be. And which is, you say, well, why would I do that? Why would I spend more money for that 10 years? Well, most projects and most folks I need success as fast as they can to make it economically feasible for them. So the competition takes care of itself. There will be some competitions and some seedlings will lose out, but the research suggests, and our experience suggests over our since 1951, the higher the seeding rate, the more successful you be. Economics play a point in that too. So there becomes a point of limiting returns where you're spending more on the higher you get in that seeding rate, you're spending more on your blend than you're getting in benefits. So that's where kind of the double rate is kind of the sweet spot where we have success and it still remains economically feasible.
Just a couple more here. Laura asks, are the species varieties you mentioned cultivars created by Bamert?
They're not created by us. We do some native harvests where we'll go out and natively harvest a species. We try to sell those back into the areas they're most adapted to. A lot of our varieties come from plant material centers that have been released over the years. We have several ecotype specific releases that come from our partners, maybe at the Texas Native Seeds or other organizations that have selected ecotype specific selections and then given to us, and we put them in the production system and increase them. But we don't produce any of our own varieties.
And then Bill asks, Rob, what are your thoughts on weeds after you plant? How can they be beneficial to restoration programs, keeping soils cool?
Yeah, so weeds are Mother Nature's scabs, and weed is a plant out of place. So we have our thought in our mind's eye what a weed is. Sometimes they can be beneficial. If we're to the levels where the plant density is so high, we're out competing what we're trying to get growing, we have an issue. But sometimes weeds can be our cover to help provide shade, reduce erosion, maintain our moisture in our soil because of less evapotranspiration. I mean, that's evaporation, and provide a living root. So with our covers and our nurse crops, when we we want to use those as the weeds, the cover that we want to see to help eliminate some of that competition. But weeds are not always an issue. A lot of times they can be, and a lot of times we have to have interventions, whether it's mechanical or chemical. Chemical gets really tricky, but to help reduce that competition and keep those weeds in check where they just act as a cover or a nurse crop.
Great. Pete asks, Rob, how does SeedSpec deal with disturbed soils?
Yep. So it can. So that's one of those things that we talked about is we can't plan for every situation or things get really complicated. All we can do is try to make sure that we're selecting the species that are adapted to the area. And then we might have to do some things outside of that if we know we have disturbed soils, like we might have to cover crop a little bit at first. We might have to really look at some soil amendments to make sure that we have P and K levels where they need to be, or pH levels. A lot of times we have our parent material on top, right? We've done a project and the topsoil's been removed and we dug a hole and we put things back in the wrong order. So that discussion with your reclamation specialist or an expert in the field to help understand that it's been disturbed and we might need to tweak. There's certain species in there that do better in those situations. We might need to raise a percentage of those, side oats being one of those, sand drop seed, but we might need to raise the percentage of those within our blend to help make sure we get establishment and get the soil covered.
That's great. And Rob Dan finally says, go Rob. And we got a lot of thank yous. There are some more questions, but we do have to, we are out of time. But we have your names here and your email addresses, and we can follow up with you directly and answer some of those questions for the group at large via some content and email follow-ups. Also, everyone on this call will receive the recording, as will the people who registered. So we'll send this out along with Rob's presentation. So thank you so much on behalf of Bamert Seed. I think this was really informative, Rob. Great work.
Right. Thank you, Melanie.
Thank you to our guests.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to walk through it real life, but call if you need that and we'll go through it.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone.